Well, welcome to our video history.
It's good to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And today we're going to interview Dr. John Jennings, who is the 65th President of ACOG. And we really start this at the very, very beginning. So, John, where were you born?
I was born in Jackson, Tennessee, and grew up in Tennessee until I left to go to medical school.
And so you all college and everything there in Tennessee?
I went to high school and college in my hometown of Jackson, Tennessee, and graduated from Union University, which is a hometown Baptist school there.
Uh-huh. And then where did you decide to go to medical school?
Went to the University of Tennessee. I applied only to the University of Tennessee. I applied to the University of Mississippi. They sent my money back and said, we don't take out-of-state students. So I was pretty much sold on Tennessee.
And that's in Memphis, isn't it?
Right, that was just down the road.
Yeah, you didn't have to go too far from Jackson. Well, what had directed you to want to become a physician? In the
9th grade, I made the decision to become a physician. And my friends and I formed a pre-med club. And of that club, interestingly enough, we got a sponsor from one of the local physicians. We were all interested in science. And it turns out a good number of us are physicians these days.
Well, that's wonderful.
And it really was an inspirational sort of thing from the standpoint, we had an extremely good science program in our high school that kept us ahead on a lot of things that you really need to prepare for medical school. And so it was almost a natural thing from the time I was in the 9th grade on.
So there wasn't an incident or an event that made you, or a family background?
My brother-in-law is a general practitioner in a small town in Texas. And of course I would visit there, and he was an inspiration in a way because he was really truly, and still is, a family doc in a small town. And that's originally what I thought I'd do, but that's not how it turned out.
But I think originally it's sort of what you did do, wasn't it?
Well, yes, I have. I've practiced.
So you started after medical school, you went to family medicine residency? Or?
Well, what I did after medical school, I interned in Houston. Then it was Vietnam War era. So I went to the Air Force. When I got out of the Air Force, I came back to Houston, did a year of OBGYN. And at that time, if you remember, a high percentage of people did a year of rotating internship, a year of some specialty, medicine or surgery or something, and then would go into family medicine because there were no family medicine residents of any great numbers anyway. I did that for a year. And I did it with a battalion surgeon from World War II. We did everything. We did cesarean sections, gallbladders, hernias, operative orthopedics. And really, of course, having coming out of the military, that on top of it was a great experience. But my love was in delivering babies and OBGYN. And so I went back and finished an OBGYN residency.
So where was this practice initially?
In Ripley, Tennessee, which is a town of about 4,000 people. Truly a small town practice. Enjoyed it. Practiced with some of my fellow medical students, graduates. And it was a good experience. And probably one of the better experiences that I wish that most physicians could be able to do that, because you really get an eye for a lot of things, broad spectrum of medicine. And I did a lot of things I would never do again. Gallbladders, I would not do one now, but 40 years ago I did gallbladders, you know. So
it was the proverbial general practitioner.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
What I call RD, real doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you just did that for a year, is that right? Or?
I did that for a year and then went back to OBGYN. I'd already done a couple of years of general medicine in the military too.
In the military. So where did you end up going for your residency?
University of Tennessee, and that was a very busy program, City of Memphis hospitals, very varied, good experience, lots of surgery, a lot of deliveries, in a time when, we were free to do, to operate and do things. I
understand. It was a very different world.
Very different training.
So, and then it was 3 years at that time, wasn't it?
Yes. See, I did a year of OB-GYN in Houston after I got out of the Air Force, and then went into practice with my friends. And then that lasted only that year because it was one of those things that I knew pretty much after about halfway through it that I really wanted to go back and finish OB-GYN residency.
What's interesting, while you were doing the year of OBGYN, did you debate whether to stay and become OBGYN then, or how did you make that decision?
Well, it was one of these draws that I'd always intended to do small town practice.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that I probably had to do before I went on and did anything else. So.
And then, so then you went back to UT and did OBGYN. Where did you practice there after that?
After that, I went to San Angelo, Texas. It was interesting at the time. There was a lot of transition in Memphis. The school system was in bad shape, and I didn't want to. I had 3 little girls, and I'd lived in the Air Force in San Angelo, Texas, where I went to practice. And I knew the people there. I knew it was a good place to live, a good place to raise my family. And so my wife and I both agreed upon that and enjoyed a very wonderful practice in that town.
Did you start your own practice, or did you join a group?
I went in initially with a group practice that was a multi-specialty group. And then my partner and I left that and established a women's clinic and I recruited 5 other physicians there, 3 of whom were residents that I had trained as chief resident in Memphis, and brought them into my practice in San Angelo. And I was busy. On a light month, I delivered 35 babies. On a heavy month, I delivered 65. And I did that solidly for 12 years. One day in 1988, woke up. My youngest child was 12 years old. She was sitting on my knee in my lap. And I missed it. She had grown up, and I'd been there, you know,
right,
I was there.
Right, yeah.
But I had been so busy that I hadn't stopped long enough to even observe things like a little girl growing up in the way I should have.
Yeah, I will share a story. I remember so clearly leaving early one morning to go into the hospital, and my younger daughter was sitting in the family room, and she said, "Daddy, why did you pick a job where you go home, you leave early in the morning and sometimes don't come home at night?" So the same, basic, same basic message. You know, our families sometimes grow up and we don't get to see all of it. So tell us what you did next.
You know, I have to tell the story of why I'm passionate about what I'm doing, though. In 1982, I was a greenhorn obstetrician gynecologist, 5 years out of residency, but I had a big practice. And some pediatricians moved into town that were young and really enthusiastic. And I talked to them, and we had a reasonably good neonatal program, but we really wanted more. And I got the obstetricians, gynecologists, and the pediatricians in town into my office, in my waiting room after work, and said, look, we really need to bring our OB units in this town together, just have one unit, because we can't qualify in numbers to be a level 2 neonatal nursery, and certainly not to provide as good a care as we could if we had everything under one roof. So we went to the administrators in the hospital, brought them together, and said, look, we as the physicians in town just would like to combine these OB units so that we'll have better nurseries and better care.
Right.
And that worked for a while, because the boards agreed on it and thought that was a good thing to do, and then it looked like an economical thing. But what happened is that there was a disagreement over people who were terminating pregnancies at that time in one group, and basically I got my name on the front page of Texas papers for 4 months because I was trying to do something revolutionary there with the changing and closing of hospital units and putting things together. And it ended up being a defeat for me in respect that I knew it was the right thing to do, but I couldn't quite make it happen. And at the time, they put petitions in the Catholic Church all over West Texas and signed those petitions and said we've got to keep both these units over so they won't have people tainted by having to go to a hospital where there are people who do terminations. And so it was a real lesson for me about politics. It was a real lesson about how difficult it is sometimes to do the things that you really want to do. But the reason I tell that story is because one of the reasons I did what I did. I left my private practice. I went to become head of gynecology at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, where I met you the first time. And I enjoyed that thoroughly. But I had raised my kids in Texas, And George Strait came to town, opened his show in North Carolina with Deep in the Heart of Texas, and down drops the curtain, and there's the West Texas scene. And my wife and I both almost cried, said, we got to go home. And I went back to Texas, back to my practice. Stayed there for about 6 months, and then my friend Garland Anderson at UTMB, who you know too, called me and said, I need a program director. And I went down there and I stayed as a program director there for 12 years until I left to become
So you weren't
chair.
the program director at Wake?
I was a program director at Wake. Yeah,
That's what I thought.
Was.
Yeah,
I was a registered program
yeah.
there at Wake Forest, and I took the program director at the University of Texas Medical Branch for 12 years.
Those are interesting jobs as being a
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you remember about being a program director for residents?
Well, what I remember about, and you probably did the same thing, I sat down with the residents and I said, look, there's only one thing that I would fire you for, and that's not telling the truth. Because if you don't tell the truth to me, I'm afraid you might do the same thing to patients, and that would be patient harm. And I trained, I lost count, 250, 270, 280 residents that I've signed certificates on through the years. And I still see them, the reward of seeing those. And occasionally, you know, you'll get a phone call at night. I'll never forget, I was sitting in my living room one night, and one of my residents, former residents who was practicing in the state of Washington, called me and said, Dr. Jennings, you just saved a life tonight. And I said, what? And it was something that I told him about, that he needed to know, which I had lectured all of them to learn to use a rapid-fire hemorrhage protocol to save lives.
Right.
And I made him memorize a clotting cascade.
Yeah.
And he thanked me for it years later.
Well, that's good.
So it's good.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
It's really what it's all about. So you were there with Garland for 12 years.
12 years.
And then where did you transition?
Then I went to become department chair at Amarillo, which is one of our Texas Tech campuses. And I've been with Texas Tech. Was a regional dean there for the medical school after that. So I've gone from private practice to head of gynecology at Wake Forest to being program director at the University of Texas, which is a big program. And then I went from there to Tech, and I was most recently my last really full-time job was the dean's job that I had at Texas Tech.
And then you retired from that.
Well, when this came along, and this is an expanse of many years.
Oh, I know.
So I could not, there's no way you could run a medical school campus and be a president of ACOG, and the two just wouldn't fit. So basically I was at a point, I was 65 at the time, and so I retired basically from Tech, but I still work part-time there. I go out there and see residents and students and see patients with them.
Well, where did ACOG start to appear in your professional life?
1976 was the first ACOG meeting I went to, and I was a junior fellow at that time. Preston Diltz, who was my chairman, I don't know whether Preston was president of Central Association and big in APGO, and he got me started, and I went to that meeting in Dallas in 1976, and then like most people, when you first go into practice, you sort of establishing your practice and you don't get that much involved in organized medicine. I did join the Texas Association of OBGYN shortly after I got into practice, because that's the sort of thing you did. And of course, as you'll remember, our Texas Association and the Texas section of, at that time, District 7 were together.
Right.
So we basically, I had stayed in contact that way. But then one of my former residents, who was Frank Ling, who is, as you know, was a...
Yeah, he's a peer of mine.
Frank sort of pulled me back in and put me on some program. He was a green coat, and he brought me into doing some presentations at ACOG. And I actually wrote some papers out of private practice that I published, and they were largely on ethics, which was an interesting thing that but at the time there were a lot of things obviously going on in obstetrics and gynecology. I mean, the liability issues were pressing, and my practice was
extremely busy
in San Angelo. And so I got involved with ACOG from that point forward.
Right.
But at the first of it was the Texas Association of OBGYN, because we were meeting together with the Texas section.
Right. Well, you've had multiple roles with ACOG. Tell us about your roles,
Well,
and we'll get to District 11 here in a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I found out about district meetings when I went to a district meeting, and it looked like I was the only one there that was paying, because everybody else was on the advisory council, and I didn't know what that was going on there. I was just learning about the functions of ACOG. And at that time, you know, ACOG was, to me, sort of the thing that most practitioners expect of it. It was practice bulletins and committee opinions, and it was the Hollister form, you know, that you bought all the time, and the bulletins that you had for your patients. And that was the service that we still do for our practitioners. And you know, I didn't even dream of being a officer even in the section of ACOG. But I got heavily involved in the tort reform issues in the early 1990s. I was president of the Texas Association of OBGYN during that time, and Lisa Ollier and I were back to back and during that time of tort reform. And I think we both experienced what you can get done by working with organized medicine. I have been the editor of Texas Medicine, our state medical journal, for 22 years. And so I've had that connection with the organized medicine within the state of Texas. So it's an interesting parallel with what I do with
That's
ACOG.
got to be one of the longest tenures for an editor anywhere.
Well,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's and it was fun, and it still is. I still stay on the board, but I just review some papers now. I don't review everything.
But then you got involved as a Texas section, and then through District 7. You helped create District 11.
This is pure history for ACOG.
I know.
I was sitting in the executive, I was up there as the chair of the Texas section after I'd been promoted from the vice chair to the chair. And I was sitting there in their beautiful uterine table, you know, and Ralph was across the way, and Doug Kirkpatrick was across the way sitting there. And I was sitting next to the chair from Montana. I said, how many fellows do you have in Montana? And he said, 78. And I said, well, gee, we've got 3,500 in Texas. And I thought about that for a minute. And so he's got 2 representatives for the residents of junior fellows in his state, and I've got 2 for 400 trainees in Texas. So I just walked across the boardroom, sat down with Doug Kirkpatrick and Ralph, and I said, we need to be our own district. And I went back, and Tony Dunn was with me, who's now the district chair. I said, Tony, we've got to go back and start a new district in ACOG. And that was in the summer of 2006, and by 2007 we had District 11 functioning. And since that time, the pride I have in what's happened is that we were very promotive of junior fellows. And you know some of the things that our junior fellows that came out of there have done. I mean, they've done a lot with the social media on the front end, some really energetic people.
OBGYN and me, or maybe my OBG, I think it is.
Yeah, that's right. And then I had the opportunity, because we did that. Then I get a call from Jay Trabin, who was in Florida, and said, you know, we're thinking about a transition from Florida, the OBGYN Society, to a district. And I went down and worked with them, and went over what we had done in forming District 11, and that then became District 12.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is a really exciting thing for me.
And you were the first district chair for District 11.
Right.
And then you've had other offices here at ACOG.
Well, I was the last vice president of the American College of OBGYN, elected vice president.
I know that.
And I guess that's some sort of, Ralph, I walked in one morning to get coffee, and Ralph reminded me, he said, you know, you are the last elected vice president for ACOG. And then I was sitting in the airport, in National Airport, going home after the executive board meeting, when I sat down with Rich Wallman, who was a past president at the time, and Rich said, you know, have you ever thought about running for ACOG president? I said, no, I never have, and I did.
Yeah. And how was that? How was your 3 years as presidential officer?
Very rewarding, and you know, we've worked on the same thing. When I looked at that collaborative practice issue, that you'd done in 1995 and how important that is to the current remaking of our healthcare system and the need for collaborative practice and team-based care and bringing those organizations together and creating that document and doing it on the basis of let's do something and do it in the way we ought to be practicing, not how we're getting paid for it.
Right.
And I think that model that we outlined in that is applicable to across the field of medicine. And I think that's something that I really feel was a nice accomplishment, and it was not on my part alone. Obviously, there were many people participating in it, and obviously you were a big help in making that happen.
Well, it was exciting because, I mean, we had done the one in '95, and it seemed exactly the right time to do it again.
Yes.
And to really convert it from collaborative practice to team-based care, which entails collaborative practice. But because we share that passion, we both know that the future of healthcare delivery is going to be in teams, and how that's going to work. So that was a great accomplishment.
Well, you know, the other thing, back to the story I told you.
Yeah.
August of 2014, we were, and you tipped me off. You know, they'd been working on this maternal levels of care for 2 years with SMFM, and I said, you know, that's my passion from 1982. And so we had a conference call, and I told our representatives from SMFM and our representatives, I want a draft by September 15th. And they said, what? We've been working on this. No, give us a draft. And then we voted on it in the November Executive Board meeting in 2014, and then published that document in the
January 15.
January 15. And when I look back and think about that, and now we're going to, in Texas, we're going to be in surveying hospitals for classifications in maternal levels of care.
Yeah,
and the integrated regionalized systems that I tried to establish in 1982 are coming to fruition.
Yeah, I think that the level of maternal care is going to be so important, and the project we'll be doing here in Texas is going to be something that other people around the country are just going to say that they're going to want to do something similar. So I think you're exactly right, and it is sort of interesting how it's come full circle for you, with, you know, the 1982 trying to pull everybody together, and now helping to get the document that is going to enable all those hospitals to be evaluated and validated as to the care that they could do.
That's right.
You've seen ACOG make a lot of changes over, you know, the last 30 whatever years. How do you see
It's 40 years.
40. I was trying to give you a break. 40 years. How do you see ACOG evolving?
Well, I see ACOG evolving in very good ways, and I see that because we're getting the idea that our job really is to provide tools for the practitioners in this country to be able to do their work more efficiently and with higher quality. And I think that what we've set up as a strategic plan right now is in that direction. Right. It really is pointing to the needs of the people that we're serving and the people they serve. And with that in mind, I think the ACOG is really on the right track. Now, we've got the same problems that other industries have, other organizations have, that you've got to learn how to use the tools that are out there and how to mobilize the power of the people within the organization to spread the good news and get it out there. But I think ACOG is fully capable of it, and I think our meetings here are examples of that. The type of things we do in our annual meetings are just the beginning of the year, each year, about how we're going to make this grow and work. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We're similar practice careers, and we've seen a lot of changes in obstetrics and gynecology, and technology has driven a lot of those changes. Where do you see the future of our specialty?
You know, I see the future of our specialty being evolving into a different mode of delivery that we have now. It's not like you and I did years ago,
I agree.
Where we were going to our nosebleeds delivering babies. It's going to be done by very highly efficient teams. And it's going to be done in regionalized integrated systems. And it's going to be done in a way that we have a some fairly, not strict, but at least strong guidelines about how we handle our difficult problems, and they'll be universally distributed so that we really are able to address the issues of maternal morbidity and mortality. I think from the general delivery of women's health care, we're going to be in the same position, amplified our ability to taking care of patients by the use of multidisciplinary approach to health care that is truly taking, in some respects, the place of the type of physician I was in 1974 and 75, which was doing a little bit of everything. I don't think anybody can do everything now with all the technologic aspects we have that are contributing to our practice.
You know, OBGYNs debate a lot about, are we primary care or are we not primary care? And as technology changes what we're going to do, how do you see that shaking out? What's going to be our role in taking care of women throughout their lifetime?
You know, one of the things we have to learn to do is we're getting more and more technology, but we have to have the wisdom to use it right, not to overutilize it. Particularly with what we do as obstetricians and gynecologists, our work is about taking care of the natural process of labor and delivery and getting healthy babies out of it. And I think that the future holds that we will still use our technology, but we will also do it within the confines of a very personal atmosphere. Get away from so much sterility of our labor and delivery units and back to more of a pleasant place for a normal delivery to occur, but with all the backup that we need for the technological use of our resources.
As we've seen all this, and we've had wonderful careers doing different things. If you had it to do all over again, you're starting again back in 1973 or 4 or whatever, would you do it any different?
Not much. Now, when I say not much, there are always things along the way that you make a mistake doing something and you wish you hadn't done it that way. But it's one of those things where you can look back and you say, well, I wish I'd done this. But if you're on the right track, if you're trying to do the right thing, then you're going to make some mistakes, but you basically stay on course, and I think that's why you have little regrets when you look back on your career. And I wish I could have done it more in one place, and that I hadn't made moves as much as I've made, because I had to do that wouldn't disrupt my family for a short period of time. But on the other hand, it's been very rewarding from day one almost.
Well, great. We have all worked as teachers and counseled and trained residents. In talking to the young graduates today, what advice would you give them about their career in obstetrics and gynecology?
Well, the first thing I tell them, and I think this is what every obstetrician does, there's nothing that is any more rewarding than a cry of a newborn baby. And I think that, when they understand that as physicians, and that's the beginning of life, and then when you learn that what happens during that time impacts a woman's life for the rest of her life, her health for the rest of her life even. And so you have a heavy responsibility. I really enjoyed the idea that and still do, that an obstetrician gynecologist is really the beginning, the entry point for a family into healthcare. I mean, you meet the father, you deliver the babies, you see the mother, you become part of their and it's existence. So it's a very, very rewarding field from that standpoint. And then I've always told residents and students, there's a lot of lateral movement. I mean, I'm an example of a lot of lateral movement that you can make in obstetrics and gynecology. I've done private practice. I've done academics. I've gone to the peak of my academic cycle. I've been in organized medicine and enjoyed it. And you can do all those things and be an obstetrician gynecologist and be able to spread the good news.
It's one of the strengths of our profession,
yes,
of our specialty.
Yes,
and it gives you those different options.
Yeah.
Well, John, this has been wonderful. It's been a great opportunity for us to sit and chat. I want to thank you for taking the time and coming to share your history and all the creative things that you've done with us. And I know people will be excited to hear this and see this for years to come. So thank you very much.
You're sure welcome.